Hello and welcome to Two and a Half Brain Cells. I am co-host Andrea and this is co-host Sabia. And today we are going to be talking about um, breaking down Olivia Jade's new confession slash apology, I guess if that's what you can call it, on the Red Table show, Red Table Talk, and just talking about college admissions as a whole and how we feel about that. So, Sabia, do you just want to break down what's going on with Olivia Jade for anybody who does not know?
Yeah, so unless you're living under a rock, you probably heard about a couple years ago how she, as well as like 50 families were caught scamming their way into colleges. And Olivia Jade was one of the most prominent ones, mostly because the other families weren't that well known. Like even Felicity Huffman, like no one really knew her kid. I think Olivia Jade got the brunt of all of the hate
Mhm.
because she was the most well known, like influencer, I
Yeah,
guess,
she's
who
like
was
famous
at,
on Instagram, fashion.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think everyone knew her, and she had just been so ignorant that like when it got exposed that she had kind of cheated her way into USC, I think everyone was so angry. Like with a completely just reason. And so basically her parents are both, I think, serving their jail time right now, like 60 days and a fine. And I think they're at a really nice prison. Like I remember looking at pictures and I was like, this looks better than my college dorm.
Dude, people
Um,
get worse for like weed.
yeah. And
Mhm.
so the premise of Red Table Talk, though, is that there's three generations of Black women: Willow Smith, her mom, Jada Smith, and Jada Smith's mom. And they call her Gammy. And basically, the three of them talk about like, issues and stuff. And so Jada wanted to bring Olivia Jade on, or Olivia Jade requested to be on the show. And so Jada was like, all right,
That's
fine.
interesting.
Yeah. Isn't that a little sus? Like, I was kind of like, to me, that's very like exploitative almost. Like, they kind of
Mhm.
wanted to use those women, which is kind of weird. But yeah, the grandma did not want Olivia Jade to be on the show. She was probably the most valid in that whole like thing. Willow kind of kept quiet, which I respect, but like the grandmother like kind of went in on Olivia for trying to like garner sympathy and like especially during these times when we've been rioting and protesting for real issues. And she's like, oh, I
Mhm.
lost my endorsements and my parents are in jail for 60 days. Like, she's going to be fine. And that was the point that the grandmother was making the entire time. Like, she's going to bounce back fine. Even if she doesn't work another day in her life, her parents can support her and probably Olivia Jade's kids, you know? Like, they
Yeah.
have the kind of generational wealth where this does not matter. But Olivia, the entire time, was like, I didn't know it was wrong. And now looking back, like I completely understand. And I do have white privilege and I want to focus on like helping other people and I want to like do something. I want a second chance to show everyone that I've learned. And the thing is, I'm trying so hard to be compassionate and like understand that. But at the same time, I was also applying to schools recently. Like I like dealt with a lot of those like inequities as well. I'm not saying I was completely like underprivileged or anything, but like I think it's really unfair for her to be like I deserve a second chance when she was 18 years old. I feel like by the time you're 18 years old, you know enough about the world to know what's right and wrong. And she admitted to knowing that it was a little wrong, but her excuse was all my friends were doing it. All of our friends were doing it. So it's okay. And that's what she was like, that's why I thought it was okay. I thought like everyone else was donating to colleges. Why couldn't we? And when I heard that, I was like, you are literally trying to justify this by like saying, oh, all my friends jumped off a bridge, so I did it too. You know that stupid thing your mom would always say?
Yeah. Oh,
I was
definitely.
I was just so floored. Like that was her argument for believing that she was right. And so she said, "Oh, I know I'm wrong now, but back then I thought I was right." I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh my God."
And
So yeah,
my mom
basically,
especially, she watched the
yeah.
show and she was just completely outraged because like
Yeah.
having a daughter who is like a first gen college student, that was like really outrageous to her because she saw like when I was applying to college and like going through that whole process, like the late nights I spent in the library and the hours that I spent reviewing and reviewing and reviewing and
Yeah.
reviewing, and then also like the way that we go out of our way to help students that are younger than us now and like don't,
Right.
we're not like paid college counselors. We just want to like help other people out. And we didn't have to like have a learning experience or like go through a scandal. It's just stuff that kids who like experience that like
Yeah.
know how to do. And like you know that saying when people like cheat in relationships, it's like you're not sorry you did it, you're just sorry you got caught. That's
Yes.
what I feel like is
Yeah.
coming out of Olivia Jade.
Exactly. And she was definitely coached. The things she was saying was just too like either she went through some sort of like diversity training or something. Like she was saying the funniest stuff and I was like, dude, this is not it just came across as like so ingenuine to me. And I remember, I think Jada was saying, well, at least you did learn something from it. And I was like, yeah, but it shouldn't
That's the
take
bare
you getting
minimum.
caught. Yeah, like you should not have like realized this once you got caught. And so she was like, I didn't go back. Like once it got exposed, I never went back. And I'm like, yeah, because if you did go back, you would have like been shamed. Like you're not
Yeah, we would have
special.
rioted you out of the
Yeah,
campus.
exactly. She was trying to make it seem like, oh, I knew I was wrong, and I immediately like, dropped out of school. I'm like, no, you did it because you knew everyone would get mad. And so it was just so like disheartening to hear that because I feel like even though she thinks like this is her redemption and she's probably going to go on and get sponsorships now. Like this is her way back into the world, you know? But like
Mhm.
in my eyes, like this is just something that you can't really condone or like move on from. She really like her parents got away with it. Like there's a black woman right now in jail because she put her kid in a different district to get a better education. And she's
Mhm.
still in jail. But Lori Laughlin's going to be out in less than 60 days. And she's in a like, fun like like expensive like
Resort.
nice jail. Yeah, exactly. And so I just think that this is so like this is the peak of like white privilege. And she's like, "Oh, I know my privilege." But I'm like, "You clearly don't because you're still like you still get to benefit from it."
And I feel like had I been in that situation of like understanding, like let's say I was Olivia Jade and I like truly felt guilty about what it took for me to get into college. Like as soon as I got there, I would start volunteering and like doing
Right.
all kinds of stuff because it's like, okay, you can't back out of that, but at least like volunteer or do some work like that and like pass it on. But she just went to college and like partied and went
Yeah.
on yachts and modeled.
And she
And
admitted that she didn't want to learn. She wanted to party. And she was like, "Oh, I'm so embarrassed I said that." And I'm like, "Again, you were embarrassed because you got caught. You weren't
mhm,
actually ashamed."
yeah.
It's just so funny. But
And
yeah,
to
like I feel
USC
like
too, that's a real kicker.
yeah. Yeah. And I feel like this is just like the tip of the iceberg though in the terms of like scams in colleges. I think about all the other inequities and it's just so frustrating. Like this was probably the peak of frustration for everyone, but there are so many obstacles and like roadblocks in the college admissions. It's so disheartening. And like the ones that come to mind for me is that like that study that predicted like you put in a zip code and it'll predict your
Mhm.
SAT score. Those
Yeah.
make me so sad because it's true, right? Like if you go to a school with less resources, you're not going to do well on the SAT, and that's also like a huge indicator of if you're going to get into a good college or not. So things like that are always so frustrating. And then also like the fact that the applications cost like $100 each. I know people who had to really choose carefully because they could only apply to like 3 schools. And so they couldn't even get fee waivers because the fee waivers are so complicated. They literally
Yeah,
just
okay.
couldn't catch a
That
break.
was that was me. I applied to more than 3 schools, but I remember like the when we had to do like our green sheets for when we were applying to
Mhm.
college, I like did it on Excel and like
Mhm.
next to each Excel spreadsheet, I like put how much my application was going to cost
Yeah.
and then I like calculated how many hours I would have to put in at the restaurant to like be able
Right.
to afford my college applications and then my SAT and ACT too, like I knew I needed a score and I only took them once because I was like, I can't afford to be putting in more hours during the school year and have my grades drop and like spending more time there just so I can take this stupid test one more time. It's like if I get like a 200 on it, I get a 200 on it and I'm done.
Right.
So it's
And
like those kinds of high stakes things are how
yeah.
like the privilege and like money that you have affects like your chance at getting into those colleges.
Yeah. And she even said like, "Oh, they hired the guy who got caught." And
Mm-hmm.
she said what I wrote was true, but he must have changed things. And I don't know what's true or what's false in that statement, but what I do know is that means that he kind of edited her essays and did her applications for her. And I have no problem with like I get it, you pay to get help or whatever, but it just
Mm-hmm.
goes to show that there are kids who are applying who don't get that help and they're at a disadvantage. And so it's so frustrating and like hard when I hear about that kind of stuff because you're especially when you're applying to a school like USC, like a lot of kids apply there and she had no interest going and then like someone didn't get a spot because of her. And that's just like one example. There was probably hundreds of thousands of kids who benefited in a way that other kids didn't, and because of that, those underprivileged kids didn't get in. And that
This
always
is
just like
like
it's so frustrating.
this is like tangentially related, but um I was talking with one of my other friends who goes to a different college, and she was joking about like, oh, like one of our other friends who went to her same college and got a boyfriend, and she's like, oh, good for her getting her MRS. And I was like, her what? And she was like,
Yeah.
like MR. And I was like, a master's in relational studies? And she was like, no, like miss it, like a your title when you get married. I was like, what the hell? And she was like, yeah, it's when you go to college to find a boyfriend. And I was
Yeah.
like, who would do that? And she was like, oh my gosh, Andrea, like you're so silly. Like I'm sure some people go to Yale to like get a boyfriend. I was like, nobody goes to Yale to get a boyfriend. It's too hard.
Yeah.
What? And I was just like, in the moment, I was like appalled. I was like, there is no way that anybody in their right mind pays university tuition for something you can get on Tinder. But people do that. People do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my mind was just like blown.
Yeah. It's
And
like
I
those
was,
like the children of famous people who go to like Harvard and get a degree in like art or like music appreciation. I'm like, what are you doing? You clearly
no, but
don't need the
I
degree.
have friends that are like going to Yale and like doing art, but they're like geniuses.
Right. No,
They're
no.
like,
I mean like the people who are getting the degree for the sake of having a degree. You know
oh,
what I
okay.
mean? Yeah.
And then it's like, but what are you gonna do with it?
Right.
Like that's
Yeah. I also my one of my other issues with the college admissions thing is like high schools in general. Like if
mhm,
you go to a private school, you have more one-on-one time with a counselor and they can recommend colleges and you get more personalized their recommendation versus like at a public school, they're dealing with hundreds of kids and less genuine letters of recs and less help. And I think about those kind of disadvantages too, and it's like ingrained in the system. Like Olivia Jade benefited because the system is broken. And so I
mhm.
feel like we can reprimand Olivia Jade all we want, but like the real problem is that the system is designed to make the rich kids go to good schools and the poor kids go to bad schools. And it's really unfair because you have to like go against so many obstacles just to get ahead, only to have to deal with college loans and like financial aid and all these other issues and working while you're in college. And it just puts you at such a disadvantage. It's like it's so unfair.
I have one last question for you before we
Okay.
wrap up, and this is something that's kind of been on my mind since my mom told me about whatever. I didn't watch the Olivia Jade interview because I was like, I'm sick of you. But if you were in her position, what would you have done? Or how would you have like cleaned up the mess?
Okay, so I kind of thought about this actually because the way I see it, she at first didn't think that she was wrong. She thought that what she did was valid because all her friends had done it too. And it
Hmm.
took a lot of reflection for her to realize, like, oh, um, I have privilege or whatever, like, this is my fault. And if I was white and this happened to me
Hmm.
and I didn't know what privilege was, I would have done what she did. I would have hired someone to coach me on privilege and talk about it with women of color so that she looks like a good person. Like whoever is like Olivia Jade's manager is a genius because this move like put no one can critique when you're like talking to three black women. Like you can't critique the show at this point. So now she's kind of moved on. Like this was her confession or move forward. She's
Hmm.
gonna get her ads again, her sponsorship. She's gonna go back to YouTube, and everything's gonna be fine. And that is like, I don't know how that's happening, but it's gonna happen. Like this is normal. Like
No, but like if
celebrities.
you, Sabia Mian, like if it came out that your
Mhm.
parents like bought your way into XYZ Monsters Inc. University, like what would you do?
But like, am I brown or am I white in this
You're
situation?
you. You are you.
I wouldn't have done it. Like, I don't understand how you think that's okay. I feel guilty about my parents paying 10K a semester for me to go to college, let alone
Yeah.
500,000. Like, I can't imagine how you think that you can spend that kind of money on something like this. Like,
Hmm.
and just even say I don't want to go to college and your parents are going to spend that much money, like that is ridiculous. I feel immense guilt when my parents pay like the bare minimum. Like, I just can't believe that that was like running through her mind, like, oh, this is okay. Like,
Hmm.
I don't understand that.
Yeah,
I
for
mean, what would
sure.
you have done?
Dude, change my name and move to Alaska.
Yeah, I mean, if you're rich enough, the way I see it, you could have lived a subtle life in like Montana and no one would have bothered you
Dude,
again.
Maine. I would have gotten a cabin in the forest in Maine and
Yeah.
just said, like, not my problem.
Yeah.
Deal with it. All right. Well, I think that was a pretty solid rundown. And thank you for listening and stay tuned for our next episode.